Howdy, howdy. Long time no hear. Hope everyone's doing alright. We've had a rough couple of weeks, unfortunately. Our toddler ended up with strep throat, and our oldest had a double ear infection. I've lost my voice several times and was just diagnosed with TMJ, which means I am on a liquid diet. So much fun. So I hope that that explains why I haven't been able to upload any new content recently. We've just had a rough August. But with that being said, grab your parka, because we are heading to the icy state of Alaska. And just so that you know, most of the information that I'm using in this episode came from the Anchorage Daily News. Warning: the following case depicts abduction and murder. Viewer discretion is advised. Edward Kraus was born in Germany in 1870 as Edward, and I'm probably going to butcher this, Schlompke? I'm not good with other dialects, I'm sorry. We're going to call him Edward Kraus because that is what he is known as in the U.S. That is also all of the information about where he came from and childhood and all of that I was able to find. He was in the United States military. He was in the Army. And around 1902, he deserted the Army because his unit was sent to China to participate in the Boxer Rebellion. By the 1910s, Edward was well established in Petersburg. So established, in fact, that he was the head of a very violent gang of thieves. And he had also tried to run for Senate. The MO behind his crimes was very simple, yet very clever. You see, Edward preferred victims with no spouse or children, so he didn't have to worry about them being reported missing. One of the saddest and probably most anger-inducing facts about this entire case is that over 100 years later, no one has identified or even located any of the bodies. And Edward made sure of that. After killing his victims, he would use their paperwork to pose as the person that he had killed so that he could access their possessions. One victim in particular, he used their identity to obtain a mortgage in Victoria, British Columbia. The only reason he was ever caught was because he broke his pattern. Now, what could possibly cause such an obviously smart man to make a change to his pattern? Well, a woman, of course. The woman in question was Miss Celia Jessicus. Now, unbeknownst to Edward, Celia had another suitor named William Christie. Some stories also say his name was James Christie. In late 1915, Celia chose to marry Mr. Christie. At that time, Christie worked for the gold mine operation that was on Douglas Island near Juneau. Now, Edward and William had never met, even though they were romantic rivals. Just a few short weeks after they were married, Edward paid a visit to the mine that Christie worked at. Edward claimed to be a U.S. Marshal named Miller. He was such a convincing liar, he was able to lure William Christie away with a false subpoena. William Christie was never seen or heard from again. Edward Krause was immediately viewed as a suspect in the disappearance of William Christie. Celia told the local newspapers, and I quote, "The minute Billy was kidnapped, I thought first of Krause." Soon after her interview, a warrant was obtained and alerts for Edward's arrest were sounded. Guards were posted at all docks in the area, and yet he was still able to use an alias to sneak on a boat that was headed to Seattle, Washington. A family traveling on the same boat pointed Edward Krause out to the local police once they docked. Had it not been for that family, he most likely would have gotten away and started a brand new life under the alias of one of his victims. I fully believe this, since he was already going by Old Mo at the time he was arrested. He also had several deeds and items that originally belonged to Old Mo. Now, Old Mo was last seen boarding a boat with Krause near Petersburg in 1913. Krause told the Seattle police that Mo had decided to return to Europe and left all his Alaskan valuables to him. The police were not convinced by this unlikely story. And why would they be? Because it would have made more sense for him to take the valuables to Europe with him, because it would still be a fortune at that time. That was the whole point of the gold rush, was to make a fortune. Why would you give it away? Krause's arrest would begin a year-long investigation that would link him to at least 8 missing men. It's believed he killed more. There was never enough evidence to prove it. However, during this time, the police were able to uncover his real name and his military background. Turns out, he was stealing the military payroll. That's how he was able to run. Gotta start somewhere, right? During 1916, he was repeatedly indicted. Not just for the murder of William Christie. No. For property crimes, mail fraud, and the murders of Kumajiro Yamamoto and James Plunkett. For many of the other murders, the prosecution had to prove the victims were actually dead, even though there were no bodies. Since they were never able to locate William Christie's body, Krause was only charged and convicted for kidnapping because it was the most serious part of the day that could be proven. Celia visited Krause at the jail, begging for information on Billy's body. His only response was, "I cannot tell." With Yamamoto and Plunkett's murders, the prosecution believed they could reconstruct the chain of events to show that Krause had killed them. The prosecution made the Plunkett case a priority. That specific trial began September 22, 1916. Closing arguments were heard on October 5, 1916. The jury only deliberated for 6 hours before returning with a guilty verdict. Krause acted tough and stoic during the entire trial. That is, right up until that guilty verdict was read. Upon reading it, he immediately paled and collapsed into his chair, only to recover enough to shuffle back to his cell and collapse into his cot. He would spend the rest of 1916 appealing the case. By early 1917, the motion failed, and he was scheduled for execution on May 11, 1917. Now, at some point during all of this, he was able to get his hands on a knife, and he would use that knife as a hacksaw. On April 12, 1917, he was able to successfully escape the jail. What would follow would be one of Alaska's largest manhunts ever. They redirected fishing fleets and closed the mines so that the miners could join the search. Thousands of the men were actively involved in the search, especially since Governor John Strong offered a $1,000 reward as incentive. Nowadays, that $1,000 translates to roughly $22,000. That would have gone a very long way for a family back then. After being on the run for about 2.5 days, Krause started his way south. On April 15th, he docked his small, stolen boat near Dottie Cove on Admiralty Island. The home on the island belonged to Arvid Franson and his family. Franson had been working on a boat at Thane when the crew heard that Krause had escaped. Franson immediately came home due to concern for his family. Krause checked the homestead for about an hour before he began his approach. The Fransons were having lunch as one of the children pointed him out. Franson grabbed the rifle off the wall as his wife stepped outside. When Krause didn't respond to the wife's greeting, Franson stepped outside. While aiming the rifle at him, he asked the stranger if he was Krause. to which he responded with a simple yes. According to Franson, Krause's teeth were locked tight as he spoke through them. His eyes were set and glaring. As Krause spoke, he turned away slightly from the porch. Franson said he had a bulge under his coat that made him think it was a gun, so he shot him. After firing his rifle twice, he effectively hit Krause in both the chest and the head, killing him instantly. Franson then covered Krause and sent for the marshal to retrieve the body. After a positive ID and a quickly gathered coroner's jury, Governor Strong awarded the $1,000 to Franson, who then very promptly and smartly handed it to his wife. The 3 jailers on duty the night of the escape were all fired. As for Krause, he was buried in a plain box within the Juneau Evergreen Cemetery without a ceremony. I truly hate that the victims have never been identified or found. And that's actually not accurate because they may have been found, but there was no way to ID them at the time. And I didn't expect to find so much information regarding a case so old, but it was a very fascinating read. If you guys haven't already, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. On Spotify, I typically have a poll regarding the episode. I try to keep it up for about a month. I try to do something very similar on the True Crime and Whatnot podcast Facebook page. So if you're interested in having any kinds of discussions or anything like that, that would be a good place to look for us. But other than that, till next time, stay true and whatnot. See ya.